Steeler Nation, and welcome to the latest episode of your Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate. Here on the Syndicate, we talk about all things black and gold. We talk about our Pittsburgh Steelers. Mark and myself are both diehard Steeler fans who love to talk about Steeler Nation and our Steeler heroes. Guys, if you have not yet hit that subscribe button, come and join the Steeler Syndicate family so you don't miss out on any of the great content. There is so much coming up in the run into the season, through training camp, through pre-season, and obviously once the season starts, even more content coming up. So please hit that subscribe and ring that bell so you do not miss out on any great Steeler content. You know, guys, training camp starts on the 27th of July. And obviously 90 players now are going to training camp with the signing of Doug Costin today. However, eventually that 90-man roster is going to have to be cut down to the 53-man roster. It's interesting, isn't it, that going into training camp, certain players know that going into training camp, they're guaranteed their places on the roster. The likes of TJ Watt, Cam Haywood, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, players of that caliber, James Daniels, for example, all guaranteed their spot on the roster. Of the rest of them, there are players, obviously what we call as on that fringe. Players who could make it with the right amount of effort, the right amount of quality performance in training camp, but also the right amount of quality performance in pre-season. Obviously, the Steelers only play 3 pre-season games this coming pre-season. They only have 3 games as opposed to 4, which the NFL has often had in the past. Steelers even had 4 last year because obviously they were involved in the Hall of Fame game against the Dallas Cowboys. It'd be interesting to see how the Steelers get on, how the Steelers line up in the forthcoming preseason games. But these preseason games are going to be a time when my so-called Fab Five, as I've nicknamed them now, have an opportunity to prove their worth to the Steelers coaches and prove their worth to get onto that 53-man roster. Now, Steelers Insider and someone I respect and have spoken to, Noah Strackbean, identified these five players in a recent article that he wrote. And he talked about them in terms of why he thought they would be great candidates to actually make the 53-man roster. Now, the first player he identified was someone that I really do like, someone I identified earlier on in the preseason and then in the off-season as been a potential candidate to come in and strengthen the running back room. That man is Matteo Durant, the kid from Duke. Now, Matteo Durant was one of the UDFAs, the 10 UDFAs the Pittsburgh Steelers signed. Along with Jaylen Warren, he is in contention to make that running back room. I think there is a real lack of faith in Steeler Nation, in Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. A real lack of belief in the fact that they can actually be a backup to Najee Harris. There is a hope, I think, a desire within Steeler Nation that someone like a Matteo Durant can emerge, or even a Jaylen Warren that can emerge. Matteo Durant is someone who's coming out of Duke and was very impressive during his college career. Now, Noah Strackbean is someone who was at OTAs, he was at minicamp, he's seen these guys perform. Yes, I know it's football in shorts, but he's still seen them perform. And he's someone who is in the press box, he's someone who is a good person to listen to as a Steelers insider who can form an opinion on these players. Noah described him as being quick, fluid with the ball, instinctive as well. And all of minicamp and OTAs, he really showed himself to be a natural ball carrier. Noah felt that if he could add special teams to his play, then this was something that would help him guarantee him a roster spot in the 53. But I certainly think Durant is someone worth watching through this training camp and through this preseason. And I agree with Strackbean, he could well be a great person to replace Ant Mack and back up Najee Harris this coming season without the Steelers having to go into the trade or the free agent market to find a running back. Now, someone else that actually was a bit of a surprise to me that Strackbean identified was a guy called, there's this guy here, Steven Sims. Steven Sims, the ex-Washington football team, Washington Commanders, Washington Redskins, Washington Wasanames, whatever they're called these days, player. He obviously was on the Steelers roster last year and actually beat out Anthony Miller for a game day roster spot. Didn't actually touch the ball, but did beat out Anthony Miller for a game day roster spot. Now, it's felt by a lot of Steelers insiders, including Noah Strackbean, that the Steelers will take 6 wide receivers into this season on their 53-man roster. The first 5, I think, are self-evident in the fact that it will be Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, and Gunnar Olszewski. The 6th one comes down to competition directly between Miles Boykin, Anthony Miller, Cody White, and Steven Sims. Now, at the moment, Steven Sims is the outsider. But what does Sims have that singles him out from the others? Strackbean identifies the fact that Stephen Sims also has special teams ability, and the Steelers love their wide receivers and running backs and fringe players to have that special teams ability and be able to perform for Danny Smith's special teams. Sims has played on special teams. He's also been a kick returner. He's been a punt returner, and he is someone who can actually add to the Steelers special teams, as well as being there in a position to make plays as a wideout. When he came to Washington, he was actually identified as being a very promising young wideout, someone they thought would actually be a potential star for them at wide receiver. Here are his stats from his time in Washington. In 2019, he played 16 games. He had 34 receptions on 56 targets for 310 yards, averaging 9.1 yards per catch, 4 TDs with a long of 65. In 2020, he played 12 games, 27 receptions on 37 targets, 265 yards on a 9.8 average and a single touchdown. He also had some rushing as well, 9 attempts for 85 yards in his first season and only 1 attempt in his second season. So obviously limited experience there, limited snaps, and he got limited targets. Obviously, like Tony McLaurin around, and the fact that Washington had some very inconsistent quarterback play over the last few years. But Stephen Sims is certainly someone worth keeping an eye on over training camp and through the preseason to see if he could sneak in and take that 6th spot on the roster. At the moment, I would say it's probably highly doubtful. It's probably more likely to be Miles Boykin, if anybody. But Stephen Sims is an interesting watch going into training camp. I think Noah Strackbean has pulled this name out very, very well. The third person on Strackbean's list is John LeGlue. And Noah Strackbean made a very interesting point when I was reading this article that he wrote. He said that it was interesting that it seemed that the Steelers' best offensive line play came when LeGlue was in the lineup. Now, he was not saying that LeGlue was some sort of superstar, but he was a very solid piece in that offensive line. It's felt that LeGlue could be the primary backup in a number of positions. The one thing that LeGlue brings that very few of the other linemen bring, other than perhaps someone like James Daniels, is that he can play in a number of different positions. LeGlue can actually fill in on all 5 positions on the offensive line. He can play tackle, he can play guard, he can even play centre if required. So we all know how Tomlin loves his position versatility, and that's something that LeGlue will bring. So there's a good chance LeGlue could well sneak onto the offensive line as a backup tackle or a backup guard or even a backup centre because he has that position flexibility. So look out for John LeGlue through the training camp and through the preseason and how the Steelers use him and in the positions that he is used. Now, someone who I know gets Steeler Nation going, someone who a number of Steeler fans treat as a sort of cult hero a little bit, and that's the skipper, the Tuzar skipper. You know, guys, when we first got Tuzar skipper, I actually didn't think that this guy's name was real because of the references to some sort of Russian thing. Obviously, the Tsar in Russia and skipper, obviously, like a bit of captain. So, but no, Tuzar skipper. So Tuzar skipper is the former preseason MVP, isn't he? After all, he's the preseason MVP, guys. He held a sack record, if that was actually a real thing. He could well land an offensive line spot, more due to the lack of depth and the lack of quality already there, rather than to anything outstanding, particularly that he brings to the team. If you look at the current Steelers offensive line, outside linebackers, who could play as edge rushers or RLBs, that is Jannard Avery, Derek Tushka, who played some snaps last season, TD Moultrie and Tyree Johnson. Last two obviously been undrafted free agents. Avery has missed a lot of the OTAs and a lot of the minicamp with injury. Skipper is arguably the best choice for bringing consistency and could well easily sneak in at 3rd or 4th spot on the outside linebacker. Derek Tushka is also another possibility, but Tushka really, for me, is not, I don't think, the first person to come in if Watt and Highsmith are being spelled. I certainly wouldn't want to see Tushka come in as your first change outside linebacker. I mean, ideally, you'd like to see them go out and get somebody still in free agency or in a trade, or if another team cuts a high-profile outside linebacker, someone who could really back up Alex and TJ. The only thing I would say on that is I think they've been slightly stung by the Melvin Ingram experience last season. So Tuzar skipper, I think, is a very good possibility to make the 53-man roster. Now, the final person on Noah Strackbean's list was Chris Oladukin. Now, I personally would love to see Oladukin make the roster for selfish reasons, because that would mean that Mason Rudolph likely is gone. And I do think Rudolph needs to go. I'm not a Mason Rudolph fan, and I would love to see him got rid of now by the Steelers. It's a likelihood that Mitchell Trubisky will be QB1, and I think given the fact that he was a first-round pick and at pick 20, you've got to see Pickett as QB2 to stand on the sidelines, hold the clipboard, and learn this season if he isn't going to start. Olajuwon would likely be lost to the Steelers if he was put on the practice squad or waivers. So for me, Olajuwon, I would keep hold of him and put him on the roster at the expense of Mason Rudolph. Allow Rudolph to go, either release Rudolph or cut him or try and trade him if you can get anything for him. But more likely cut him because I doubt that you're going to get very much for him. Olajuwon, I think, also is thinking of the long-term future. And that's something the Steelers always try to do, isn't it? They always try to think long-term and for the future. Olajuwon, I think, will be a great backup to Kenny Pickett in the future. And Pickett and Olajuwon have already started to develop a very close relationship as good teammates. That's something we need to keep and foster. And I think if we lost Olajuwon, that would be a big mistake for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there's the 5 players. Just to recap, Matteo Durant, Steven Sims, John LeGlue, Tuzar Skipper, and Chris Olajuwon. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think of those 5. Do any of those 5 make it? Or is any we've missed or that Strackbean missed that could actually be fringe players who can make the roster? I like that list. My good friend Noah Strackbean with a good list there. So guys, let me know what you think in the comments. And remember guys, if you have not yet subscribed to the Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate, hit that subscribe button. Come and join the Syndicate family. Thanks for listening guys. Here we go Steelers. Come on!